Hebrews chapter 11 is where we've been spending some time the last few weeks and looking at the examples of faith that the Hebrews writer gives us there. He's talked about plenty of examples throughout the Old Testament. And we last time looked at the example of Moses, and he talked about the faith of Moses and coming out of Egypt and all of that. So he's talked about Moses, talked about Abraham and Abraham's family, and Sarah and Noah and Enoch and Abel and all of those. Well, then he finally gets to a point here in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 30 where he kind of quickly gives a couple more examples and then basically is like, we don't have enough time. I don't have enough ink and paper to write down all of the examples of faith that we could talk about. But notice with me today as we continue looking at this in Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to pick up in verse 30 today, where after he talks about the faith of Moses, and then even in verse 29, when he mentioned the faith of Israel, going through the Red Sea, he then mentions by faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were encircled for 7 days. I mean, that took faith. That took faith for them to walk around in circles and not do much else. But by their obedience to God in faith and walking around the walls of Jericho in circles, God, because they believed and obeyed, brought those walls down. By faith, the harlot Rahab, who we can also read about there in that same instance in Jericho, she did not perish with those who did not believe when she had received the spies with peace, because she had faith. She came to believe. And then he says, verse 32, what more shall I say? I mean, we could go on and on and on, for the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith they subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions. They quenched the violence of fire. They escaped the edge of the sword. Out of weakness were made strong. They became valiant in battle. They turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women even received their dead raised to life again. And so really from verses 30 to 35, he's talking about all these, great stories that we can even read about ourselves in the Old Testament. We go back and read each of these instances and the faith that was shown, that by faith all these great things happen, these victories in battles and overcoming lions and fire and sword and people being risen from the dead, and all these great victories that were accomplished by the power of God through these people's faith. And those are great stories. They're fun stories, events. They're exciting. They're encouraging. They're victories of faith. But then notice what the Hebrews writer does right after that. And especially when writing to Christians who are on the verge of quitting. And he gives all these great examples of faith, although it wasn't easy for them. They had a journey of faith. But they might look at, even what he says here and say, well, see, these who had faith in God and they had all these great victories and everything had a happy ending and everything worked out in the end. But now he's going to let them in on another reality of those who had faith and did not get a physical victory. He says, continuing in verse 35, others were tortured, not accepting deliverance from their torture, because they were tortured and they were not willing to be delivered, that they might obtain a better resurrection. He's talking about people that for their faith and their obedience to God were tortured, and they were unwilling to renounce their faith. They were unwilling to do whatever it took to get out of that situation. As a matter of fact, he says they did not accept deliverance because they wanted to obtain a better resurrection. That is, eternal life with God. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two. Tempted, they were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and dens and caves of the earth. So lest we think that all people in their physical earthly lives have stories of overcoming fire and sword and lions and armies, that wasn't true for everybody. They had the same faith, but different things happened in their lives. And that's important for these Christians and for us today. Lest we think that our faith in God is going to automatically guarantee that we won't have any suffering, any trials, any mockings, any persecutions, any violence, any death, because that's just not true, as the Hebrews writer has just laid out. The point is, we've got to have faith in God to the end, to the point of death, even death, suffering, whatever the case may be. And especially these Christians who the Hebrews writer is writing to that are thinking about quitting and giving up. He's telling them, look at all these examples of faith and everything they went through. How are you going to quit and give up when they didn't? And God gave them victory either in the battles of this life, but ultimately after death. As he says, even verse 39, all these having obtained a good testimony through their faith. They did not receive the things promised. God having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. They served their purpose in their generation, in their life. They didn't receive the things promised right away, but rather we're all going to receive it together in heaven in eternity with God. And in a way, I look at this as if he's saying all these examples of faith, and as he's about to say even in the next chapter, which we'll save for next time, he says these all died in faith, and they're waiting for us to join them so that we can go to heaven together. But look what they've been through. Look at their faith. By faith in God, there is victory. Whether we overcome physical challenges in this life or whether we suffer. Faith in God is the victory that will bring us eternal life in heaven. Let's be encouraged by these examples that no matter what we're going through in our life today, keep the faith. Hold on. Don't quit. Don't give up. Don't give in. Hold on to Jesus. Hold on to your confession of faith till the end, no matter what, so that we can all be in heaven together. God bless.